A rich man ignored the beggar until his son stopped, looked back and said, "Dad, that's Mom, the city never slept." But that night it felt colder than usual. The kind of cold that crawls under expensive coats and settles deep in places money cannot reach. Streetlights reflected off wet pavement like broken stars, and the quiet hum of distant traffic followed Daniel Whitmore as he walked briskly down the sidewalk, his polished shoes clicking with purpose. He had learned long ago to walk fast, to look straight ahead, to never slow down for anything that didn't add value to his day. That habit had built him a fortune, a name, and a life most people could only dream of. But it was also the habit that almost made him walk past the most important truth of his life, until a small hand tightened around his fingers, and his young son stopped, turned back, and said words that shattered everything Daniel thought he knew. "Dad, that's Mom." Before the story pulls you any deeper into this moment, take a second. If you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in the idea that no soul is beyond redemption, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps keep stories like this alive. Daniel Whitmore was a self-made man by every definition America admired. Raised in a cramped apartment in Ohio, he had sworn he would never beg, never rely on anyone, never be weak. He worked through college nights, built a tech company from a rented garage, and sold it for hundreds of millions before he turned 40. The world praised his discipline, his focus, his refusal to look back. After his wife vanished years earlier, leaving behind only confusion and a silence that hurt too much to examine, Daniel buried himself even deeper in work. His son, Ethan, became the one soft place in his life, the one person he allowed himself to love without calculation. That night, Daniel and Ethan were walking back to their hotel. After a late dinner, Daniel had promised Ethan ice cream, but the shop had closed early. Ethan didn't complain. He rarely did. He was 6 years old, observant beyond his years, with eyes that noticed things adults trained themselves to ignore. As they walked, Daniel scanned his phone, answering emails, thinking about meetings and numbers and problems that could be solved with logic. That's when he saw her, sitting on the ground near a closed storefront, wrapped in layers that did little to fight the cold, a battered stroller beside her with a worn teddy bear inside. Daniel's eyes flicked toward her and then away, just as they had done thousands of times before with countless others. He felt the familiar mix of discomfort and justification rise in his chest. He told himself he gave through charities, that he paid taxes, that he couldn't save everyone. Slowing down would only invite guilt, and guilt was unproductive. He tightened his grip on Ethan's hand and kept walking. But Ethan didn't. The child's steps slowed, then stopped entirely. His small fingers loosened from Daniel's grasp. Daniel took 2 more steps before realizing his son wasn't beside him anymore. Annoyance flashed first, then concern. He turned around, ready to urge Ethan along, and that's when he saw the look on his son's face, wide-eyed, pale, frozen in place, staring at the woman by the wall as if he had seen a ghost. Ethan pointed, his arm trembling slightly. His voice, when it came, was soft but certain. "Dad, that's Mom." The world seemed to tilt. Daniel laughed reflexively, a sharp, disbelieving sound, already shaking his head. He wanted to dismiss it as a child's imagination, a mistake, anything that would let him keep moving. But something about the woman made his breath catch. The way she sat hunched, as if apologizing for taking up space. The familiar slope of her shoulders, the scar near her eyebrow, barely visible under grime and exhaustion. The woman looked up then, drawn by the sound of Ethan's voice. Her eyes met Daniel's, and time collapsed. Years vanished. The noise of the city faded until there was nothing but the 3 of them, bound together by a past Daniel had tried to erase. Her name was Grace. The memories hit him all at once. Grace laughing in their tiny kitchen. Grace holding baby Ethan with tears of joy. Grace growing quieter as the pressure of Daniel's ambition swallowed everything else. He remembered the arguments he thought were normal. The nights he came home too late, the mornings he left too early. He remembered the night she disappeared, leaving behind a note so brief and vague that he convinced himself she had chosen to abandon them. But now, looking at her hollow cheeks and shaking hands, Daniel understood something he had never allowed himself to consider. Grace hadn't left because she didn't care. She had left because she had broken. Grace tried to stand when she recognized him, then thought better of it. Shame poured off her in waves. Her clothes were torn, her hair unkempt, but her eyes, those were the same eyes that once believed in him when no one else did. Ethan broke free from Daniel completely and ran toward her, dropping to his knees in front of her without hesitation, as if no years had passed at all. Daniel felt something crack inside his chest. He had spent years building walls so thick, he forgot what they were protecting. Now they crumbled under the weight of a single moment. Grace's life after leaving had been a series of quiet disasters. Postpartum depression she didn't understand, untreated anxiety, a belief that Ethan and Daniel would be better off without her darkness. She had tried to survive on her own, drifting from job to job, from couch to shelter, until one bad turn became another. Pride kept her from reaching out. Fear kept her silent. By the time she realized she needed help, she believed it was too late. Daniel listened as pieces of the truth surfaced, not through words but through the visible. Evidence of her struggle. The stroller wasn't for a baby. It was all she had left. The teddy bear wasn't a toy, it was comfort. Every assumption Daniel had made about her vanished, replaced by a heavy realization that his absence, his emotional distance, had played a role in her fall. For the first time in his life, Daniel didn't know what to do with his money, his power, his solutions. None of it could undo the years they lost. None of it could erase the pain written into Grace's posture or the cautious hope flickering in Ethan's eyes. But it could do something. Daniel knelt down on the cold pavement, ignoring the sting against his knees, ignoring the stares of passers-by. He met Grace at eye level, not as a CEO, not as a man above her, but as someone who had failed her. He felt tears burn his eyes, something he hadn't allowed himself in years. The city around them continued on, indifferent, unaware that a family was being reborn in the shadows of closed shops and flickering lights. Taking Grace's hand felt like stepping into fire and finding warmth instead of pain. She tried to pull away, overwhelmed, but Daniel held on. Not tightly, not forcefully, just enough to say he wasn't going anywhere this time. Ethan leaned against her, fitting perfectly where he always had, and Daniel understood that whatever happened next, walking away was no longer an option. Change didn't come easily or quickly. Grace didn't transform overnight. Trust had to be rebuilt brick by fragile brick. Daniel arranged for immediate shelter, medical care, counseling, not as a transaction, but as a commitment. He showed up, day after day, learning how to listen instead of command, how to be present instead of productive. Grace fought battles Daniel could never see, but she fought them with support instead of isolation. Ethan watched it all with quiet wisdom, his simple belief acting as the glue that held them together. He never questioned why things had been the way they were. He only cared that they were together now. Months later, the three of them walked down another street, warmer this time, brighter. Grace still had scars, visible and invisible, but her steps were steadier. Daniel still ran companies and made deals, but he left work earlier now. He noticed people. He slowed down. He learned that ignoring suffering didn't make it disappear. It only delayed the moment when it would demand to be seen. Before this story ends, if it has touched your heart even a little, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who might need hope tonight, and subscribe to the channel. Stories like this remind us of the power we all carry to change a life. And just before we close, leave a comment telling us what moment moved you the most, or who this story reminded you of. Your words matter more than you know, because sometimes the greatest miracle doesn't happen when a rich man gives money to a beggar. It happens when he finally stops, looks back, and sees the human being he once loved, still waiting, still worthy, still alive. The months that followed did not unfold like a fairy tale, and Daniel learned very quickly that love alone could not erase years of pain. Grace moved into a small apartment near Ethan's school, refusing at first to stay in Daniel's glass and steel penthouse. She said she needed walls that felt human, rooms that didn't echo with reminders of everything she had lost. Daniel respected that choice, even when it hurt, even when every instinct in him wanted to fix things fast, to buy comfort the way he always had. This time, he forced himself to slow down, to sit in the discomfort, to understand that healing was not a transaction but a process. Grace began therapy, sometimes returning home exhausted, other times angry, occasionally silent for days. There were mornings when she couldn't get out of bed, when the weight of old memories pressed on her chest so hard it felt impossible to breathe. Daniel saw then what he had been blind to years ago, the invisible battles she had been fighting alone. He learned how easily strength could be mistaken for stability, how often people hide their breaking point behind a smile. Instead of pushing her to be better, he learned to simply be there, making breakfast for Ethan, sitting quietly on the couch, holding space without demanding progress. Ethan thrived in ways that amazed them both. Children, it turned out, did not need perfection. They needed honesty, consistency, and love. He talked openly about the night he recognized his mother on the street, about how he had always remembered her face from old photos and half-forgotten dreams. His certainty that night became a quiet anchor for the family, a reminder that truth has a way of surfacing no matter how deeply it is buried. Teachers noticed he smiled more, laughed more, drew pictures of 3 people holding hands instead of 2. Daniel's world, however, was changing in ways he never anticipated. For the first time, success felt hollow when it wasn't shared. Boardroom victories lost their shine compared to simple moments. Watching Grace water plants on the balcony, listening to Ethan read aloud before bed, sitting at a kitchen table that felt alive again. Daniel began visiting shelters anonymously, not to donate checks but to listen. He recognized faces like Grace's everywhere, people who hadn't failed life, but had been failed by silence, stigma, and neglect. Each story chipped away at the man he used to be and shaped someone more grounded, more human. There were setbacks. One winter evening, Grace disappeared for hours without answering her phone, triggering Daniel's old fears. Panic set in, sharp and paralyzing. When she finally returned, shaken and ashamed, admitting she had felt overwhelmed and walked until her legs gave out, Daniel understood how fragile recovery could be. Instead of anger, he felt gratitude. She had come back. She had chosen to come back. That choice meant everything. Trust grew slowly, like a fragile plant pushing through cracked concrete. Grace began to believe that she was not a burden, that she did not have to disappear to protect the people she loved. Daniel began to forgive himself, not by forgetting the past, but by taking responsibility for the present. They talked about the night she left, about the misunderstandings and unmet needs, about how love can suffocate when it isn't paired with listening. Those conversations were painful, but they were honest, and honesty became the foundation of something new. Years passed, and the memory of that cold street never faded. It became a compass. On anniversaries of that night, Daniel would take Ethan and Grace for quiet walks through the city, reminding himself how close he came to walking past his own family. Grace eventually began volunteering at a women's outreach center, her experiences allowing her to connect with others in ways no textbook ever could. She told her story not as a warning, but as proof that falling does not mean you are finished. One evening, as the 3 of them sat watching the city lights flicker on from their balcony, Daniel realized something profound. The greatest wealth he had gained was not measured in numbers or assets, but in awareness. He had learned that ignoring pain does not make you strong, facing it does. He had learned that love demands presence, not perfection. And most of all, he had learned that sometimes salvation arrives in the smallest voice, the one brave enough to stop and say what others are afraid to see. If this story reached into your heart, if it made you pause and think about the people you may have overlooked, please like this video, share it with someone who believes in second chances, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps spread stories that remind us to look again, to care deeper, to slow down. And before you go, leave a comment sharing what this story made you feel, or who it reminded you of. Someone out there may read your words and feel less alone. Because in the end, life doesn't change when the rich finally give. It changes when they finally see.